My name is Randi Silverman. As I said before, welcome to our first webinar. And this webinar is on e-learning and how to advocate for your child. And I'm really excited to have with us today a very special guest who is the founder and executive director of Special Education Legal Fund. And it's Christine Lay. I should have made sure I could pronounce your name correctly before we started.
That's okay.
Why? I knew I was not going to do
That's
that
all right.
I had a really bad feeling about that. I'm so sorry.
We did everything else. It's fine.
I am so sorry. So good morning, everyone. So for those of you who are not familiar with chats or Zoom or webinar, there's a button at the bottom. This is just a little housekeeping. There's a button at the bottom of your screen called chat. Feel free to either chat everybody, all the panelists, or feel free to chat all the panelists and attendees, or you can even send a private message to me or Christine. If you have questions, however, I really would encourage you to use the Q&A box. We are going to do the best we can to answer all of your questions. If you use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to type in a question, it will be anonymous and you won't see everybody's questions. You'll only see the questions that we answer. So you can feel free to send me. I'm going to act as more of an interviewer, and I'll be giving Christine some of the questions that you guys pose for us. So feel free to do that. I see Clifford from Brookhaven Disability Task Force has joined us, and he said hello in the chat. So I don't know if everybody can see that or that's just to the panelists. So anyway, welcome. That's just a little bit of housekeeping for you. It is anonymous. You are not visible to anybody but us, but we are really excited to have you here. And this has been a really difficult time for so many of us, and special education is one of the things on the top of parents' minds, especially if they have children who are struggling with mental health in any way, shape, or form. So with that, I would like to pass it over to Christine and give her a little bit of a chance to introduce herself, and then we'll go from there. Again, feel free to ask questions through the Q&A box. All right, Christine, it's up to you now. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Randi, so much, and to the Youth Mental Health Project for inviting me to come speak on this webinar about special education and the COVID-19 era. Special Education is a nonprofit organization that provides grants for legal support to families in need with children in special education in Connecticut and Westchester County. Our mission is to level the playing field for families in need with children in special education. So to that end, we also endeavor to provide knowledge and therefore empowerment to families whose children have an IEP and therefore are entitled to special education services. So that's a little bit about what we do. Randi and I'm really excited to have this dialogue with Randi about special education in this sort of virtual learning age. I just wanted to make a couple of points before we begin. First, I'm not an attorney. I am a parent, first and foremost, of a child with special education needs. So I'm speaking this morning from my perspective as a parent of a child with special education needs, and also as the executive director of this organization and advocate for parents across Connecticut and Westchester. So none of what I say this morning should be construed as legal advice or legal consultation, and much of it is informed by the experience of our clients, who are mainly, as I said, in Connecticut and Westchester. The last thing I was going to say is just to remember that this is a public forum. So please try to keep your questions general, because we want to be as helpful to as many parents as possible. But also remember that anything that you say could potentially lead to your child and your child's disability being identified. And so we don't want to do that. So that's my housekeeping.
Great. Christina, a question came through, which is a housekeeping question, which is, will we be archiving this video and sharing it anywhere? Yes, absolutely. We are recording the video, which you can probably see right now in the top left-hand corner of your screen. And our intention is to make it available to anyone, either both through our YouTube channel and also on our website, which is ymhproject.org. And I would imagine we will share it with Christine and and she will find ways to share it as well. So there will be a recording available on our website. I don't know how long it'll take us to get it up there, but we will definitely be storing it for future use. Thanks for that question. I also wanted to say, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Youth Mental Health Project, we are a grassroots not-for-profit organization, and we were started also from a group of parents and professionals, and our mission is to empower, educate, and support families and communities around the very important topic of youth mental health. And so one of the ways we do that is through parent support groups. So for those of you who are not familiar with our support groups, we have support groups for parents who are concerned about their kids. No diagnosis is needed, but if you're concerned about your kid's mental health in any way, shape, or form, we have support groups where you can meet other parents just like you. Our experience, and my personal experience, is that as parents, we provide each other with the best resources and the best support, and because we understand what it's like. And so while Christine will say, well, I'm a parent, not a lawyer, and I will say I'm a parent, not a mental health professional, I do feel that we, through our multiple years of experience in this field of advocating for our children, whether it's for their mental health or their special education, probably know about as much as any layman could possibly know about these issues. So, and for me, again, I find the best resources come from other parents who are passionate about this issue because they have experienced their own troubles and realize, wow, we have to get out there and help other parents. So that's the purpose of this webinar today, as well as all of the rest of our webinars that we have coming up. How do we use the information that we have gathered and the resources we have gathered as parents and bring them together to help other parents who are struggling just the way that we have struggled? And so special education is a really important topic to me. I actually am a recovering lawyer, and I say that because I don't practice law anymore, but I did, and I was never a special education lawyer, but I found myself in a situation where I had to learn really quickly about special education. My son struggled with anxiety, depression, and mood disorders at a very young age, and I didn't know that he qualified for any special education services. It wasn't until he was actually in a psychiatric hospital that somebody told me that the school could be helping me, and that's when I did a lot of research. And so now I know is that you don't necessarily have to have a learning disability or a physical disability to have a disability. There are some mental health issues that are disabilities because they impact the way your child learns. So with that background, I wanted to really get to the heart of what I've been hearing in our support groups and from our followers and from our parents about their concerns about special education and what's going on right now with COVID-19. So Christine, in general, what can you tell us about the status of what's going on in the world with our kids? Oh, wait, you know what? I wanted to take a poll for you first, didn't I? I'm so sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to take a quick poll just so we can get a sense of how old your kids are and where you're from. So if you don't mind, be
Randi,
very quick.
I see in the chat that, or in a Q&A, that someone's commenting that the Q&A function is not anonymous.
All right, I'll check on that while everybody's doing this poll. I will see what I can do because it says allow anonymous questions. You maybe have to check that you want it to be anonymous. In my settings, it does say that we're allowing, and my director of outreach is texting me separately. When you put a question in, you have to check that you want it to be anonymous. So you're able to ask it anonymously, but you have to check that you want it to be anonymous. So I hope that, yeah, I hope that answers the question. So let's see, we've got a little bit half of voting. It looks like this is really helpful, everyone, for us to be able to see where people are from. The poll would only I had to put in specific states, and I didn't want to put in all the states, so I apologize for my my way of putting.
That's all right.
putting it, but we certainly have a lot from New York and Connecticut, which is not a surprise because we are, Christina is based in Connecticut, and we are national, but we are headquartered in New York, and I am currently located in Connecticut, as is most of our staff, so it does make sense. We've got 63% voted. Looks like we have, almost 45%, 12 to 18, and then 5 to 12-year-olds. So that's super helpful. All right, thank you so much. Sorry, with that information, it looks like,
I mean, so
wanted to vote is voted.
No, that's helpful. Obviously, what we are talking about this morning, I think Randi and I had spoken about this, is a little bit more about, less specific to regions, but what we as parents can do during this time, not only to support our children while we are at home in this unprecedented learning environment, but also what can we do to prepare for the day that we return to school, and what is that going to look like for our kids with individualized education plans. We have spoken to many parents all across the United States since the beginning of this crisis, mainly to get a sense for how students are learning in the new virtual environment, and also to understand how special education is being translated to an environment where, social distancing is the goal. And what's been translated online, how has instruction been translated online, what has happened to related services, things like that. And what we found is that, broadly speaking, special education online differs vastly across school districts, across states, across regions. And that's pretty similar to the way special education is in more, quote, normal times, because service and delivery varies greatly across different districts, and even within schools, within districts. Some districts have modified their curriculums for in accordance with IEP, individual IEPs. Some districts have not. Some districts offer virtual instruction to all of their students, including those with special education needs. Others are not. Some districts are holding virtual or, by telephone, PPT, IEP, CSE meetings. Some are not. All of this comes as the Department of Education on a federal level and also on individual state levels continue to issue guidance rather than, directives on how to continue and maintain IEPs during this time. What I have been saying to parents as I have spoken to them over the course of the past month or so is there's a couple of important things that you have to remember. The first of that is that you, as the parent, are the most important member of the school team, always. And even more so in this time, because the odds are that right now you're a parent, obviously, but you're also a teacher, general education, special education. You might be providing the support that a paraprofessional provides to your child in a school environment. You might also be interfacing and helping provide related services like speech therapy or occupational therapy or something like that might translate, on a virtual basis. So you are functioning in a number of different roles. What's important to remember is while this is obviously a really, really difficult time for everybody, the knowledge that you are gaining during this time of seeing your child learn in your home is going to give you an invaluable perspective for when you go back to school and when you are representing your child at your next school meeting. You are more important than ever because you are going to be the repository of really, really great information about the way your child has navigated this period.
That's really interesting, Christine. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's a really interesting perspective because
lemons out of lemonade, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, when children are struggling because of, anxiety or depression or mood disorder, some mental health problems that are getting in their way of really being able to learn, whether that's at home or at school, Well, two things. First of all, I always found with my kids that they behave very differently at home than they did at school. And I'm wondering how many of the panelists, that the participants out there are finding that it's different at home than it is at school. So that's one thing. But you're right about being able to watch the reactions your children are having to whether it's doing math or are they able to read on their own without getting upset, or where are they having their breakdowns. Those are really important things to take note of.
Right.
And to and my old lawyer hat gets on, and I say, keep notes.
Yeah.
To keep a journal, really
Absolutely.
pay attention and write it down, because it seems like you might remember, but then it passes,
really
and we are so easy to forget, right?
Yeah.
It's so easy to forget what happens.
So one of the important things, as we kind of, delve into that is keeping track of a couple of things. One is, the progress that your child is making during this time, which is now like, stretching into months, really.
Right.
So in your typical environment at school, you were entitled to receive progress reports from your students, team about their progress vis-a-vis their different IEP goals and objectives. So you would receive these reports periodically from the school that tells you, kind of where your child is relative to the goals in that particular period. Now, obviously, in addition, during this time when your children are at home, in addition to being the teacher and the paraprofessional and the therapist and
everything, right?
You also have to be the data keeper, the record keeper for what is happening. So on two fronts, I would, there's two things. One is there are lots of good online resources for, data sheets that you can download, you can change, you can make your own. I suggest kind of, there's sort of two functionalities. One is from an academic perspective. And for an academic perspective, if you're trying to track, a reading goal or math or something like that, that's something that you can look at maybe once a week. Make sure that it has a lot of flexibility so that you can write notes in it. Student refused to participate in, assessment this week is important, even if you couldn't get any data. So those are things that, that are important to track on, kind of a weekly basis as we move through this. The other method of data that we think about, those of us who have parents or parents of children on the autism spectrum, for example, or children who have, emotional disturbance labels on their IEP, or, any other kind of, mental health challenges, is, behaviorally what's happening. And so that you would want to, collect your data, but in a more flexible way. And that, you're looking at your child, like, when is your child struggling? Asking yourself questions about your child in this environment, like, what time of day are they struggling? What are they struggling with? Is it math? Is it, science? Is it English? Is it whatever? Is it unstructured time? Is it structured time? Are they struggling with the social isolation? All of that.
Right.
So keeping in mind, what all these different questions that you can ask yourself about how your child is doing in this environment, and keeping track of it on, and that's another thing that is really important, is making sure that you have dates and times, because all of that is important. And when you go back to the school in, June, or, hopefully, or September,
or whatever
it is, then you can say, on, 7 consecutive Tuesdays, my child, had a meltdown after presented with a timed exercise in, whatever. So that's a much more powerful statement when you get to a school meeting, when you're collaborating with your team, than saying, my child has trouble with, with
100%. And one of the things I'm going to share is, as a parent whose child, my child had very severe school refusal, a lot of anxiety. He would shut down, or he would explode and throw textbooks across the room. homework became something that he would not do. And it was in his IEP that he didn't have to do homework.
Right.
So I keep picturing, what would I have done if my child was 10 years old right now? He's 23.
Yeah.
He was 10 and that was happening. And people, my mental health professionals kept saying, keep a journal, keep a journal, keep a journal. Oh my God, I was so exhausted. The idea of keeping a journal was almost impossible. But what I did learn from that experience is I'd have a few good days and I'd forget, when did that happen last week? So I really highly recommend, if you can't do anything else, parents, then just write a little scratch pad with dates. Today was horrible, he wouldn't do any work, or couldn't get him out of bed, or he was fine until lunch. I don't care if it's 3 words, write something down every single day, because that information is really important. And I know some of you parents are exhausted. This is exhausting.
So exhausting.
It's so now you're expected to be, the mother, the cleaner, the cook, and you probably maybe have your own job that you're working, and you have to teach your kids, and maybe you have more than one kid, and you're supposed to keep track of all this. It's exhausting. But as Christine said, it's really important to recognize you're the captain of this ship, right?
Absolutely.
We know our kids better than anybody.
Right.
And if we don't pay attention to what's happening and keep track of it and then communicate it to our school districts, they're not going to know.
Right.
They're
so
not
I'm
going to know.
Address kind of 2 things with that. One is something that I always like to say to families, particularly when you have younger children, is very seldom is a child going to come to you and say, I have significant anxiety about school and the work that I'm supposed to be doing online. That's not what they're going to say. What they're going to do is they're going to come to you and they're going to say, I have a headache.
Or I can't do this anymore.
Or I can't do this anymore. Or I want to go back to bed, or I'm really tired. So these are all different, means of getting information from your child and communication and, whatever else. Now, so, now that you're at home, you've been gathering this data. I'm sorry to keep using data. I know that sometimes parents find that off-putting because it gets confusing and overwhelming. I mean, really just, observing and, and making notes about your child. So you're gathering this information.
Right. It's data is any kind of journal keeping that will help you remember what happened, if nothing else. If you don't have the energy to write the whole thing down. We have a question that just came in, which is important, about how do you recommend they keep their own data? Is it a computer? Is it a journal? Now, I know there are apps out there for charting moods, for instance, right? To chart your moods. There probably are some great special education resources out there. I don't know, Christine, if you have any off the top of your head that we could share.
So SEEK of Connecticut, which is Special Education Equity for Kids, it is an organization, nonprofit organization in Connecticut that works on behalf of children with special education needs. They have also been doing a series of webinars every Thursday and have created, with the help of a BCBA, Solandi Forte, and other people, a data collection sheet, which they have located on their website, which
that's great.
Is SEEK, CT.
What is it?
SEEK, Special Education Equity for Kids. So they have a data sheet on their website. I think understood.org might also have a data sheet on their website. But what I want to say about the data sheet is, is you should do whatever you're most likely to do. So
100%.
Your data sheet could be notes on your iPhone. Your data sheet could be
it could be a legal pad.
Exactly.
Right.
You should do
Dana. Dana put up the website there. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you,
Johnson.
Dana.
Actually, I think that's only to panelists. Let me see if I can add all attendees. Yeah. It's on the chat box. But I 100% agree. At the end of the day, you have to do what works for you in your house. And if it's nothing more than writing a note on your calendar on your phone, on a piece of paper. The
Right.
dates are important, and here's why the dates are important. Because every day is a little bit different. Sometimes you'll have 3 days in a row that are the same, and then it changes. And then if you over time keep track, you'll start to see patterns that you can't see up front. You can
Absolutely.
usually only see them from a week away or 2 weeks away or sometimes a month away. It took me years to figure out that wintertime, my son was always depressed. I mean, I look back, I don't know why it took me so long to figure that out.
Yeah.
But that, I could look back over time after keeping records that, wow, gee, every November, this kind
The
of
same thing
behavior would,
happened. Why did I
right.
not notice
So
that?
why
Yeah.
didn't I realize that? Right. And I think we are so trying our best to get through the moment that it's easy to forget what happened last week or the week
That's absolutely
before.
right.
But
That's
when
absolutely
you
right.
want to advocate for your kids, when it comes to their special education or educational needs, having that information is so important, whether it's about their behavior or about their learning.
Mhm.
Are they able to get through the packet, of materials? Are they able to sign online and check in? Someone wrote, which is really a good idea, is to keep an online Google Calendar. There's a notes section. So I think
That's
that's
great.
a really
Yeah.
good suggestion. Also, anything that you can keep that would sort of track it.
The calendar
So
is a great idea as well because it helps you kind of lay it into a timeline. Because at the end
right,
of the day, when you're trying to gather all this information and think about it and present it to the team, in a way that presents the most comprehensive picture of your child, the
right,
timeline is really, really important. And
yeah,
keeping track of what happened when is hugely important. I had not used that function with the Google Calendar. I'm more of an Excel person, but you got to do what you have to do, and whatever
that's
is going to make
exactly
you
right.
the most likely to do those things is going to be the most effective for you.
Right.
Um,
So not that this isn't important, but I want to make sure we get to some of the questions that are
oh yeah,
coming
sure.
through. And I think 100%, that's remembering that you have to keep records is important. That's all well and good, right? But things are shifting so rapidly. E-learning and remote learning or distance learning or whatever you want to call it is different in every school district, and it's different for every child, right? So I've had a lot of things that have come up, questions from parents about, so, whatever is happening in my school district. So I have one parent who had a kid who was in a therapeutic support program,
Mhm.
day program. And when they went to distance learning, they were sending him packets of
Yeah,
paper,
yeah.
and he would refuse
Do
to do
them.
them.
Mhm.
And just, he needed to be in a peer, and but the being with peers is what motivated him
Mhm.
to actually even show up at all. And
Yeah.
so the packets weren't doing anything. So that's one example of a child struggling with the
Yeah.
e-learning. How do you recommend that a parent approach the school district, or what should the parent do if they're
Yeah.
feeling like this new way of learning, whatever it is, whether it's packets or checking in at 9 o'clock on, Google Hangouts or whatever it is, and it's not working for your kid? What do you do? What does a parent do about that?
Right. I mean, I think that there's a couple things that I would mention. Obviously, if the situation is not working for your child, you absolutely need to reach out to your child's caseworker or special education administrator or assistant principal, whoever is the point person for your child's program. You
Right.
absolutely need to reach out to them and talk to them about the problem, the issues that your child's having. That being said, there are things obviously that are not going to translate to a virtual learning environment. That the context of peer interaction that you just mentioned is one of them.
Right. Right.
There are some, children who are going to find it very difficult to engage in an online learning format.
Right.
And fortunately, I mean, we're all kind of rethinking an educational delivery model that's been in existence for 100 years in a period of weeks.
Right.
So things are going to take some time to, to figure out, and some things aren't going to be figured out. Like if you are receiving direct adult paraprofessional support for your child for physical issues, that's not translatable, to a virtual model. However, if your child had para support for, for other reasons, whether it be prompt support or, something like that, those things might be translatable. So, it's important to think about, really what's going on with your child. But absolutely, if your child is struggling, you need to reach out to the team that works with your child and to explain. I was talking to a mother, one of our clients, just a week ago, and she said, and her son is nonverbal, and they are sending packets of high school Shakespeare, like worksheets for him to do. And so she's staying up all night doing these worksheets with him. And the school said that they can't modify them. Well, then you have to get into a situation where you communicate with the school district about what is possible for your child in this, in this environment.
So Christine, that's a really good question. Would you recommend that parents stay up all night with their kids working on worksheets with them? I have one, right. So I have one parent
absolutely not.
Was so, right. She was so worried about her kid failing that she did the work for him. And I get it. It's
well, absolutely. That happens all the time, even in a non-virtual setting, for sure.
Right. What I have recommended, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is, I know it sounds horrible, but let the teachers see that your kid can't do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If your kid, especially a teenager, if a teenager cannot get up and do the work, that needs to be evident, and you're helping them do the work and helping them sign in and logging them in isn't really actually helping them.
That's absolutely right. That is true, not just for teenagers and not just in this time. Is, if you are doing the work for your child because you are afraid of them failing, I get that, like I do, but you are also preventing the school from having a full picture of what your child is capable of doing.
Right, because then they say, well, he's doing well, so we don't, what's the problem? He's getting these,
or helping him.
Yeah, that was a very hard lesson for me to learn, right. I love this quote. Do not rob your child of the opportunity to fail. I think failure, we're so afraid to let our kids fail, but failure is how they learn. I mean, I've learned everything I've learned from failure. I mean, failure is an opportunity to build resilience. It's really, really hard for kids who are emotionally fragile. And I know with my child who had anxiety and depression, and he was just fragile. He would fall apart over nothing. My picking up the pieces for him delayed him getting the help he needed. But I'm going to get back to communicating with the school district, because last night I was on a virtual support group call or Zoom session, and one of the issues one of the parents had was that their teenager who struggled really badly with school refusal prior to this was actually suddenly doing really well. And he was able to get up at his own pace, do his work at his own pace, hands it in. His teachers were so impressed. He's getting A's and B's. He's more stable than he's ever been. And she got a notice from the school district that they're switching everything as of Monday. And they're now going to be insisting that all the kids check in at 9 o'clock and have all their work done by noon. And I said to her, well, listen, that might be, the principal made that announcement to everyone, but her son has an IEP. Right? Her son has an IEP.
The situation is working for him, and God bless him that is the case. It is the case with some students that the move to virtual learning has alleviated a lot of the stress and pressure in the school environment, the social anxiety, whatever. So that's definitely a case that there are students that are doing quite well in the environment. Absolutely. The child has an IEP. The child was doing well in the structure that had been laid out in the first few weeks. Absolutely, there's no reason for that parent not to communicate with their, caseworker, assistant principal, whoever's in charge of their child's program, and communicate that the previous situation was working, and, we'd like to continue using that, using that if possible. And it sort of, brings, to, this sort of broader issue of communication. I have a lot of families that, aren't generally inclined to speak up much during normal times. And now they're even less likely to speak up.
They don't want to bother anybody.
No, you don't want to bother anybody. Like, everyone is in
the poor teachers.
A crisis. The teachers are at home. They've got their kids there. Everyone's screaming. So they're even less likely to speak up in this situation. But what I would say is that, this constant flow of collaborative communication is going to be the key to both getting through this and coming out on the other side of it in in the best position for your child. So this is not to say that you should, dump a laundry list of complaints onto the teacher or the administrator like every day. But, what it does mean is that, the flow of information should be consistent. And, it also includes like what's working and what's not working. I'm a huge fan of email because, I think that email is the most important thing that's happened to special education in 20 years, because not only does it create the timeline, it creates a record, it's notes of what's happened, it's notes of the communication you've had with the school district. However, in this time, because we're all at home, we're under a tremendous amount of stress, I wouldn't normally say, I wouldn't necessarily normally, advise parents to call a teacher first. But, in this instance, I think that it's important to realize that, we're all kind of, working under pressure, and what is the most convenient thing for everyone in this scenario. So, does the teacher have a small child? Do they want to call me back when the child's napping in the afternoon? Does the child have teenagers? Do they want to speak at night? So just reach out to the teacher and ask them, when is a good time for us to speak about, my child and, what's going on this week. So you make that time, you speak to them on the phone. And the reason that I'm saying to talk on the phone first and to follow up with an email later is because, the delivery on the phone is going to be softer than it's going to be when you're typing something in an email. And in time when we are trying so very hard to maintain the highest level of, collaborative energy that we can, I think it's important, even if I'm not a phone person myself, so I don't, it's not my, thing. Like, I want to, tap out an email instead, or, but the most important thing is to keep that collaborative communication going. Reach out, have a brief phone call, describe the issue with the teacher, and then follow up with an email. As we discussed last night on the phone, these are the things that we talked about, and this is what
you can even say in the conversation, I hope you don't mind, I'm just going to send a follow-up email because I know we're all busy and I'm afraid we'll forget, but you don't have to respond to the email. I did
as much for myself as it is for you.
Just so I can keep track of everything. And even, I used to send emails when my son was in crisis, and I was trying to get the school district to understand what was happening. I really believe in collaboration. I believe if you the special ed department people, the case managers, the teachers, they're not in it for the money. You know what I mean? They're not. So if you go after their heart and let them know this is really a struggle for us, and I really am doing my best, but I don't know how to handle these certain things, that usually works better than just demanding X, Y, and Z. And I was at a point where I was emailing almost daily. My son wouldn't get out of bed today, or it took me 3 hours to get him to get to school.
I've been there myself. Yeah, exactly.
And I've emailed those things, and I would say, I'm just letting you know you do not have to respond, right? You don't need, and I set it up in advance with those people to let them know that I'm not always asking for a response. And if I need a response, I'll put in the subject, help, I need your help, or, but I do agree, phone calls, if you can, followed up by emails is the best way to keep that conversation open, to create a paper trail for communications, to remember for yourself in a month from now what was happening. But I think the most important message for parents out there is, don't be afraid to communicate what's going on at home, whether that's your kid. And, you know, for kids who are really embracing this, yay.
Yeah.
And if that's working, try to communicate that too, that this is what's working, and another change, because transition is tough for kids with special needs anyway, especially if they have underlying mental health problems. But if it's not working for you and your child, that has to be very clearly communicated, and in a collaborative way, try to explain why it's not working, what you're seeing at home, and that things do need to change. Your rights and your child's rights to receive a free and appropriate education have not ended because COVID is happening. They haven't ended.
That is very clear. You know, that is very clear. The guidance is very clear that school closure does not obviate the district's responsibility to provide a free and appropriate public education for your children.
Right.
Obviously, however, the service and delivery of that education has changed. And, you know, and we are all, not just, you know, parents, but teachers and administrators, technology specialists are all struggling with that as well. You know, is how to translate what we have been doing to this new world order.
And someone just wrote in, what happens, how do you hold them accountable? For instance, if a school district is putting all their PPTs or CS meetings or whatever it's called, wherever you live in New York, it's CSE, in Connecticut, it's PPT, but your special education committee meetings that determine your child's IEP or services, what happens if the school district says, well, we're just putting those on hold right now?
Right, that's really hard. That is actually really hard, because it is very clear in the guidance that has been given in Connecticut and New York as well, that the school closure is not meant to mean that it's not meant to be a blanket statement for a school district to, you know, to cancel all PPT meetings. You know, there are certain circumstances, there are certain things that are going to be difficult to have happen during the school closure. You know, for example, like an evaluation, a school evaluation that has been scheduled but has not been carried out.
How do you do that?
It's going to be difficult to do because in order to have a really good evaluation, I mean, we've had like 7. So it's like, in order to have a really good evaluation, there is an in-person component to it. You know, there is the in-person testing, there is in-person observations of the child in the classroom. Those are all very, very crucial to a full and complete evaluation. So, and
I just say, particularly with kids who struggle with mental health disorders or concerns, because a lot of that
have behavioral issues, or
it's the behaviors that are indicative, and the behavior in front of a computer is going to be, or on a piece of paper, is completely different. And a lot of my son's evaluations of his anxiety or his mood disorder or his depression was based on the tester's observation while he was doing certain activities. It wasn't the result of the activity, it was the observation of the behavior during the activity. So that's really important.
Those things are going to be hard.
It's going to be hard.
But however, there's no reason for, you know, if your child had an evaluation that was completed prior to the closure of the school, there's no reason that report and its implications can't be reviewed in an online or telephone, you know, PPT, CSE, you know, IEP meeting. There's no reason that can happen.
Do you think you can? Do you think a parent has the legal? I know you're not a lawyer. We're not lawyers here, but we have a lot of experience. But the legal ability to demand an emergency PPT or IEP meeting if things are just really falling off the tracks? I mean, because the school districts are still legally obligated
I mean,
to provide.
I think that if your child is struggling now, states are different, and they are looking at
Right.
the school closures in different ways.
Right.
Are you, should you ask for a PPT meeting, to discuss the transition to online learning for your child? Probably not if your child isn't having like overt struggles with it. However, if you have a child that has, that is struggling, quite a bit, there's been, significant, breakdown, in the, in your child's behavior. They're refusing to do things. They're refusing to if your child is struggling, you should definitely ask for help. You should definitely reach out and ask for a meeting to discuss what can be done. There are things, that can be done. Obviously, you and I have talked offline, Randi, about, parent training, which is something that is our right under IDEA. It's the right of parents to, to have training to, for example, understand and execute a behavior plan, and, a lot of people don't know how a behavior plan is being implemented in a school setting.
That's one of the questions, actually. I just wanted to say, someone wanted to know, what supports are in place for parents, and, and I just want to say, do want to get back to another question someone had during what is the definition of struggling? How do we define that? How do we know what's to argue about? And I do want to get back to that, but while we're on this topic of parent training, can you talk a little bit about what's
struggling first?
Oh, okay.
I hear a lot of parents, particularly special education parents now, that are really, really worried about regression, about having achieved a certain, level of functionality and regressing, be back to some place, in the past that we've already, kind of, grown past.
Thought we got through, right? Yeah.
Thought we got through. I worry about that, for my typical kids, I think that, there's probably an amount of regression that we're going to experience for all our children.
Right.
This, idea of, of struggling, is something that, like they're all going to struggle a certain amount. I think that like I don't want to, I'm listening to, I'm thinking about this answer in my head and I'm like, I can't believe I'm gonna say this, but like, I do feel like you'll know if it's, if what the struggle is, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
well, so I want to speak to that a little bit in terms of mental health, because I do a lot of workshops on how do you know if your child is having a serious mental health struggle versus is it a temporary phase, right? And so I define struggling as a level of impairment. What is your child's level of impairment in their functioning?
That's a great,
right? If and there are different spheres of your life. There's
way better answer than mine.
Sorry,
I do a better answer than mine.
I do a whole workshop. I should do a webinar maybe on, how do you know mental health wise? And it really is about functioning. How is your child functioning? And since we're talking about academics, I'm only going to talk about how is your child functioning in his or her academic life. And if your child is not functioning, right, that's a serious problem. If there's no way you can get your child to do the work, that is a serious struggle. If it's causing such a disruption in your family life that, or your child's mental health is deteriorating dramatically because of everything, that is a serious struggle. Think about functioning. Now, functioning isn't, well, he used to get A's and now he's getting B's. I guarantee you, neurotypical kids who have no, think about, how is this impacting your neurotypical kids right now? Everybody's being impacted in some fashion, many in a negative way. So it's not just, is this impacting my child negatively? It's, what is the struggle here? And I think that gets back to, I have family members who are teachers. I have family members who are teachers with little kids. I don't know how they're doing this.
Doing
They're
it
trying
right
to be
now, yeah.
parent. Right. It's hard. It's hard work. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't bother them because we have to help our kids and we have to advocate for our own kids.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we have to try to keep in mind what is realistic to
Right.
ask for under these circumstances. And it could be, again, taking the journal, keeping your notes, paying attention,
Right.
so that when we get back to some sort of bit of, okay, they're now doing PPT meetings, they're now doing CSC meetings, that you are prepared to show, you know, what's happening.
Or to ask at that point for reevaluation. You know, if you're,
right.
you know, okay, this might not be our year for a triennial, but, you know, this has happened, you know, this is my log of what has gone on during the months of school closure and during the months where we were not able to have extended school year, ESY, which, you know,
right.
seems to be the case. So this is my log, and these are the reasons why I think that my child needs to be reevaluated now, because what was existing in the previous IEP, I think needs to be, you know, kind of relooked at once we're back in school. While we're on that point of, you know, the IEP, I think it's important, you know, I remember once when I was in my 20s, I had surgery, minor surgery for something. And after there's the first time I had surgery, and they gave me or general anesthesia, and they gave me a sheet that said, you know, this is what you're supposed to do in the first 2 weeks after the surgery, and then this is what you're not supposed to do. And the number one thing on the list of things not to do was not make major decisions about your life.
Right.
And kind of think about the IEP during this time as that type of situation. So if the district is if the school is coming to you and asking you to make a change to your student's IEP because of this crisis, I absolutely would not make a permanent change to the negative to your child's plan during this crisis. If the school
don't agree
to you know, like, oh, you know, your child was getting, you know, 5 hours of, you know, of services, and we want to reduce it to 2 hours of services because of the crisis, because we can't do it right now. That is not something that should be a permanent change to your child's IEP.
You can agree to a temporary change.
But,
oh, sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
That's right. You can agree to a temporary waiver of services in your IEP, but I would not agree to a permanent change in your IEP. In most circumstances, I feel like the IEP that you started the closure with is the one that you should end the closure with. And some schools, you know, then people will ask about, you know, about annual meetings and annual reviews and stuff. Like many students right now have an annual meeting that, you know, either is or is not happening because the school district hasn't decided whether or not to hold a PPT meeting right now. And, you know, I really feel like, you know, by and large, the document that you entered the closure with is the one that you should have at the end of it, unless there's going to be improvements to the positive to your plan.
So I have a question. What about kids who were, according to their IEP, placed in therapeutic or residential programs? So
yeah,
we have a lot of parents who come to support groups whose kids are in residential programs, and the residential programs have closed.
Yeah.
And or even in day support programs that are therapeutic, and they've closed. And it's a very, you know, very different type of IEP and education. I mean, what I don't
have much guidance for you on that one.
I can't even imagine that, right? Because my son was in a residential program, and if that had closed and he had come home in the height of his not being well, I don't know what that would have looked like.
Mm-hmm.
But I would imagine I would make sure I was in very close touch with the school district special education department, whoever I had a relationship with there, and say, I need some serious help, because
it's interesting because I don't have any clients in a therapeutic setting, so I can't speak directly to that.
Sure.
And obviously it's a very difficult issue. I have found actually that my clients who are in private placement at special education schools have been navigating this fairly well, because the private secondary, special education schools have gone online and they're providing a level of service to the student online. Most of them that I've seen have like a 9 to 2:30 school day, and the kids are doing well, or as well as can be expected in that kind of setting. Unfortunately, I don't have any perspective for you on the therapeutic school issue. Because obviously that's a significant one. It also extends obviously to group homes or any other kind of, multi-person living facility, type of environment that might be shut down because of the crisis.
I think what I would say, just having had a child in a residential program for so long, and that was, he was sent there by the school district. So it was part of his IEP, that I would have made sure I was in really close contact with the special education committee and department, and just try to get as much help as I could therapeutically. I think my personal experience is, and my personal feeling is, right now we have to take care of our kids' mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's nothing more important than that right now. And if that means, they're not doing much schoolwork, well, they have the rest of their lives to get an education. I just feel very strongly that, and we're not therapists. We're not trained for, maybe some of you parents are, but it's very hard to be a therapist to your own child.
Trained as a BCBA, you're, being a BCBA to your client is a far different thing. A board certified behavioral analyst. Works, that's going to be a very, very different experience than trying to therapize your own child, for want of a better word. It's just not gonna, we are not, as parents, that's not our role.
We're not qualified.
But
if I was qualified to do that, I wouldn't have had, my son wouldn't have had to go to a residential program. I couldn't do that. It was beyond what I was capable of. And I think that was under regular circumstances without COVID. We actually have a couple of comments on that privately. Someone who works for a residential program said, kids are really struggling. However, the advice you give is to build a team of support virtually right now. Coaches, mentors, therapists, psychiatrists, family members, don't take it on all yourself. Keep your boundaries with your child in place. Pass the baton. Oh my gosh, anonymous attendee, I don't know who you are, but that's absolutely my advice. And it gets back to what we were saying before about creating a team. The team is both a mental health team and an education team. And it can include teachers who you get along with, your therapist, your child therapist, your whatever adult,
whatever the resource is.
Whatever the resource is. Support groups for me were a lifeline to be with other parents. They were part of my team.
Coach. It could be
executive function coach, anything. And you use whatever you can, because you cannot do it all yourself.
That's right.
I know some great youth theater programs that are doing after school theater things that are really keeping the kids busy, and it's all on Zoom, so think out of the box of what can help your child realize you're the captain of the team, but you cannot do this all yourself. So anonymous attendee, thank you so much for pointing that out. There was another question that came up, and I'm not sure I understand it. It says, can we have a separate agreement on what closures look like and what the regular IEP? I think what the question is, I'm not sure I really understand it, is because we were talking about don't agree to something different, because at the end you want your regular IEP.
Okay, so that would be sort of a waiver. That would be a temporary waiver of services rather than a change in your IEP. I mean, an IEP can really only be changed in 3 circumstances. One is a PPP meeting. One, it can be amended by written agreement if the parent agrees. And the third way is in a due process hearing by hearing officer. So those are the 3 ways in which an IEP can be amended. Now, I have seen, I've seen a couple things in, in this crisis where the IEP is, the school team is attempting to amend the IEP to reflect the current crisis by reducing service hours or whatever that are mandated by the document. And that is not something that that I would counsel parents to agree to a written change in their IEP. And that's what I'm saying. If the school district says we cannot provide paraprofessional support for your child for the time of the school closure, do you agree to a waiver for that? Then, I think that, you need to think about what paraprofessional support is being provided to your child. Think about what can a portion of it be provided online? And if not, then consider, the waiver of those services in that context.
Right. And just, you don't have to agree to things. I think some parents don't even know that, right? Sometimes you get an IEP, oh, we've changed it. Well, guess what? I don't agree to that. And make sure you put in writing, or you can even email, I understand why you need to do this, and I'm sympathetic. And
I do not agree to the change.
I don't agree to a long-term change, although temporarily, right. I see why a temporary fix. It's not necessarily a separate agreement. In our chat, we have a question about my son has speech and OT in a group, and he needs one in group and one-to-one. How do I manage that?
I think that I think you're asking about paraprofessional support in a group, speech or OT session. Is that what it is?
It looks like it's the person who's yes, she just said yes, that's what she's asking. Yeah.
That again goes to the what is the paraprofessional doing? Is the paraprofessional providing physical support to your child? Then that's probably not something that can be done, virtually. If the paraprofessional is providing prompt support to your child in speech or OT or whatever, maybe that's something that can be done virtually. It really depends on, what level of support is being provided. And that's something, again, for you to have a dialogue with your school team about. I mean, I do think it's important to understand that, and this does not, obviate, the school district's responsibility at all, as I said before, but, we're all working through this together, the school districts, teachers, paras, therapists as well. And some things are just not going to translate to that forum. And some things will take a little while for them to work out how it's going to translate.
Right.
And
it's hard to be patient because it's exhausting.
It is exhausting. It is exhausting. And it's really hard to look at your child and see them either, regressing or suffering or taking backwards.
Really hard.
That's very difficult.
And that's where I say, put mental health first. I know that's just my thing, but I really think, I really, having a child who was suicidal at 9 years old, mental health is the most important thing there is. And if that means certain things just have to wait, then certain things have to wait. But at the same time, don't ever hesitate to communicate and advocate and see what you can get to happen. Dana Johnson made a great point, which is what you said, Christine. You can disagree with services and at the same time allow them to implement them because there's nothing else, right? You don't have to agree with it to receive them. I think that's a really good point. So,
thanks, Dana.
You can, right? I think that's a really good point. And just legally down the road, you do want to protect yourself if for some reason you need to go backwards and say, this was really a bad thing, and my child has regressed, and now I need even more services than I needed before, right? So I would imagine if my son's residential treatment closed down and he came home and things got worse, then when this was all over, I'd need even more help. And so that's another thing. You might not be able to get everything you need right now, but the hope is down the line when things sort of
and that's a lot of what the discussion that's going on in the in the legal community and in the parent community is you know, around right now is around, you know, compensatory education, around comp ed, and what that's going to look like, you know, at the end of this. I think that, you know, there are parents out there that are looking at, you know, my son has missed this many hours of speech and this many hours of OT and this many hours of direct services, or, you know, or whatever. And counting those up and saying at the end of this, I'm going to get those made up. And I don't think that that's necessarily going to be the way that compensatory education ends up playing out.
Right.
You know, compensatory education, generally speaking, you know, isn't, you know, like, it's particularly in this situation, you know, on a like hour for hour basis, you know, might not necessarily, you know, manifest that way. So it might not be that, you know, your child has missed 50 hours of speech and they're going to make them up when school is back in session. Schools you know, need to provide compensatory education, but it isn't, I don't think it's going to be on an hour, you know, to hour makeup kind of basis, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah,
just
exactly.
Possible.
So one thing I really want to make sure we get to, because this person asked a while ago, sorry, I'm trying to navigate questions and chats and everything, and talking to you at the same time, in case everyone's seeing, why are her eyes going all sorts of crazy ways? That's why. But let's sort of wrap it up by talking about the kinds of supports that that are out there for parents. And I did want to point out that one of our attendees put out an Eventbrite invitation to a free webinar that she's giving, or she is giving, as the director of parent support for a residential treatment program. There are a lot of great free webinars out there. We're doing our best. We're actually going to have another one coming up on coping with your kids' feelings and emotions, social emotional learning at home, that kind of thing. And we're always working to bring new things, but there are a lot of great resources out there for parents. But what else can you talk about in terms of special education, the kinds of supports that parents that might be out there?
This is great. Thank you for bringing this up, because I would have forgotten about it. The first resource that I would look to, you know, as a parent, is to make sure that you're current on what your school district is saying about special education. Most school districts have put out statements or guidance about, you know, special education policies and procedures. You need to stay current on those, particularly because they will change over time.
Yes,
Same is true for your State Department of Education website. They will periodically put out, you know, frequently asked questions, guidance, statements about what is going on. I think Connecticut's done, I don't know, you know, Dana, you would know this better than me, like 6 or 7 statements on special education at this point. That's something that's very important to keep current on. The Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education, also has guidance on special education and COVID-19 that's important to stay current on. One great resource for families, particularly that are, you know, looking to understand the legal, you know, sort of, you know, implications and guidelines for a lot of what's happening on the federal level, is the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, which is COPA. And their website is www.copaa.org. That's COPA. And
COPA, I love COPA. In fact,
it's a great organization.
It's a great organization. How do you feel about Wright's Law?
Oh, I like Wright's Law as well. I
like Wright's Law.
I am only pointing to COPA because they have periodic action alerts that are, you know, that will bring your attention to things that are happening at the federal level, you know, and, you know, things where, you know, it might be, you know, they'll put a call out action out to their, you know, particular, you know, database of supporters for things that are happening, you know, in Congress or, you know, whatever. You know, with the CARES Act and stuff like that. So there, that's a great website. In addition to having a comprehensive directory of all special education attorneys and advocates that practice law on behalf of families in the country.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I was on their website last night, actually, and they have a lot of great stuff on their website. So
Yeah.
I interrupted you. Sorry about
That's
that.
right.
Go, continue.
The understood.org is another good organization. Yep. I actually have not looked at their website since this crisis has started, but I imagine, they are a great resource for information about special education law, about specific things. They have nice little form letters that you can use if you're not sure of, particular language. Like they'll have a letter, how do I request a independent educational evaluation?
Right.
And then you can just drop in your particular information in that. That's
great.
And then our website, we have a blog that is updated periodically. Our website is www.spedlegalfund.org, SPED legalfund.org.
I'm putting it in the chat, everybody. spedlegalfund.org.
And
in fact, I'm trying to put all this stuff in the chat. So, yeah,
and our most, because I'm not a web genius by any means, so when I have new information, I will generally post it to the blog, and and we have been pretty active during this period of posting to the blog, every 2 weeks or so, with information about what we feel has been going on and resources for families. So those are things that and then Seek of Connecticut, which we mentioned before, and I think has kind of gone through the chat as well.
I just realized I was doing this all to one person accidentally. I was typing all this stuff in only to Lisa. I'm so sorry, everybody. I have to go back. Thank you, Dana, for putting that all. Your website's great, and I'm just going to do a little plug here for the Youth Mental Health Project.
Absolutely.
If you go to parent support, we are not special education specific, but we do run, as I said, free confidential support group meetings for parents. And they've really taken off. I have to tell you, we have 10 locations in 5 different states that we're running in person, parent-to-parent peer support meetings. Now we've taken them all virtually, and we're running at least one national meeting per week for parents all over the country. And it's really wonderful to be in a room, even if it's a Zoom room, where you're with other parents who really understand what you're going through. So that's another place to get. Oh, there you go. Carolyn, thank you for adding that. The website is on the chat. It's the Parent Support Network meetings, and Carolyn Bizzuto just posted that. So please feel free to join. They're free, and they're open to any parent of kids any age who are concerned about their kids' mental health. Not necessarily special education related, but those topics do come up a lot, which is why I felt it was so important to bring Christine on today, because we're just hearing so much about it. And Christine, you're a wealth of knowledge and resources. Did you want to say anything else before? I just don't want to keep everybody on too long, although I haven't seen any drop off.
So the only thing that I would say, kind of to wrap up, is the Special Education Legal Fund has recently launched a COVID-19 fund for residents of Fairfield County. If your student is having difficulty in their school environment as a result of COVID-19 and has an IEP and you live in Fairfield County, please reach out to me at Christine@spedlegalfund.org. And we can talk about whether your family meets the requirements to receive a grant for legal support from the fund to help you in your advocacy process during this difficult time.
Great. I think I'm putting your email address correctly in here, Christine@spedlegalfund.org. Excellent. And Carolyn, can you put my email address up there? Also, I see my director of operations is in here helping me with the chat. So if you could put my email address, of course, anyone can reach out to me directly or the Youth Mental Health Project. So Christine, thank you. I found it very informative. I will make make sure everybody gets the recording as soon as I figure out how that works. And feel free to keep in touch with us at the Youth Mental Health Project. We are bringing, trying to bring about more webinars. If you have a particular topic that you would like us to do a webinar on, or if you would like to join me and join me as a panelist on a webinar, I really would love that. I see we have quite a few professionals on the call, and I'd like to get opinions about all different topics when it comes to youth mental health, particularly during this crisis. I feel that parents need support, they need the help, they need advice, and we want to do what we can at the Youth Mental Health Project to help with that. So please reach. Oh yes, and I was just told, I forgot, there is a national virtual parent support network meeting tonight at 7:30. So you do have to RSVP, and the reason for that is we'd like to keep our meetings confidential and private. And so we only send out links to join those meetings to people who RSVP. We don't keep them out on any public network. So if you want to join any of our meetings, make sure to RSVP. So Christine, thank you so much. And
Thanks so much,
attendees,
Randi.
thank you for joining us. This has been a fantastic morning, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thanks so
Thanks
much.
very much.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.